Thank you very much. I'll kick it off with a little bit of music here. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Avoiding AI Slop, Generating Content that is Age and Level Appropriate. My name is Priddy. I'm an online English teacher, and I've been building courses and content for over 12 years. And since 2023, I think a big focus of mine has been using AI for English language education. Now, a big problem, honestly, for both students and teachers, is the focus of this webinar, AI Slop. And maybe we can start with a simple example that you may have seen from the news. So try to take in this image. Look at the details. In February of 2024, Willie's Chocolate Experience, notice the lack of a very important word there, in Glasgow, was advertised with AI-generated images like this one. This is one of them, promising a magical chocolate factory experience. I'm not sure about you, but for me, this would raise a lot of red flags. Ensure, let me try to read some of these. Enturining, catgating, that's not a word, and a little scary. Although I have to say, Karchi tons. I'm a little tempted by Karchi tons. Anyway, the actual experience was kind of a disaster. It was a big empty warehouse with some very sad props and very depressed looking hired staff. And after this, I recommend, not now, go to Google and search Willie's Chocolate Experience Glasgow and then click images. And that's about 10 to 15 minutes of good entertainment. Well, this is just to give you a flavor for the issue of AI slop. And while AI continues to improve, it is still a very real thing. And if we want to use AI for education with our students, we have to deal with it. So let's first define some terms and do a bit of a level set for the session and a bit of an overview. It's going to be pretty hands-on, but I want to give you a sense for what's coming up. So AI slop, what is that? AI slop is low quality, generic, AI generated content. And if you have used something like ChatGPT, you are probably definitely familiar with it. When you look at it, you just go, oh, no, right? Not good. And I think we could say that hallucinations fall under AI slop. Hallucinations, you may have heard this word as well. This is when AI generates information that isn't true, isn't real, even though it may seem very convincing, right? AI is good at being really confident even when what it generates is total nonsense. So what can we do about it? In this session, we're going to dive into specific problems that language educators need to handle when using generative AI. We'll cover 3 really effective approaches for doing that. We'll go over some key principles for using AI for language education. And then I'll share a few nuggets to spark your imagination and give you something to continue exploring beyond our session today. Now, we're going to be actually using the tools, just to give you a little glimpse at that. It may look something like this. We're actually going to be using AI tools today, hands-on, as I said, looking at prompts, and I'll be answering questions at the end. So make sure to put those in the Q&A. I'll be getting to questions at the end. And just so we're on the same page, what is a prompt? You may know, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, a prompt is the instructions we give to an AI tool or AI model. When I say model, I'm talking about something like ChatGPT 4.0 or Claude 3.7. There are many models at this point. And you can think of these as specific versions of AI, okay? Today, I will be using ChatGPT's 4.0 model, which is free to use. So what I'm using today is totally free. There are some limitations on it if you're using it for free, but there are, as I said, many models out there. There's always one that you can use. And what I'm doing today is not necessarily specific to this model, right? You can use the approaches we're talking about on other platforms using other tools. That's okay, right? So I'm just using this because a lot of people know it. It's pretty convenient, and it is free to use, although there are some limitations. Okay? So now let's address the main problems that we as language educators need to deal with. I mentioned hallucinations. If you are giving students content filled with hallucinations or using AI-generated results that contain hallucinations, a lot of bad things can happen. Maybe an existing mistake or error that a student has is reinforced. Hey, is this right? Is this the right adjective to use? Yep, looks correct, says AI. Well, if it's not actually correct, then the error is being reinforced, which is then harder to fix in the future. And that can also lead to confusion and trust issues. Hey, my teacher is giving me bad information. Why should I trust them? We don't want that. And what about when you try to create an activity, or let's say maybe something for adults or young teenagers, whatever, and it just doesn't fit their age group? If I want to generate an activity for teenagers and the activity I get is about the workplace, well, that's not good, right? That's not good. That's not what we want. Maybe I'm trying to create a quiz that's B1 or B2 level. And the quiz is something like, what is the past tense of eat in this sentence? Well, that's the wrong level. That's way too easy. And maybe not worst of all, but still bad, the generic stuff doesn't engage learners, which means as a teacher, you need to step in and try to fix things, or just completely redo everything, at which point you might say to yourself, I've spent so much time trying to fix this generic mush, I may as well just have done it myself. Right? What's the point of using AI tools at that point, right? Okay. So with that as our, let's say foundation, let's get into the approaches. I want to kind of dive right in because I want to make sure we have time to do everything. So let's start with our first approach. And our first approach I'm calling structured content. This approach is all about providing detail. Now we're going to look at a prompt, but I want to make it clear that a prompt is just a prompt. They're just instructions. It doesn't have to be exactly like I show you. In fact, we're going to do a variation of the first one so that you can see it's not about exactly the words of the prompt. It's about how you build it. It's about understanding what you're doing. So for this first approach, what we want to do, of course, to avoid slop and reduce hallucinations, we want to put in all of the hard work up front to create a structured prompt that does what we want, does what we expect. And that's maybe a lot of time. But if you do it right, you may have to only do it once. The alternative is asking a simple thing using, let's say, ChatGPT, and being frustrated by the results because it's not what you expected. Now, the details include things like demographics, the groups, right? Place details, if that's important. You want very, very precise, targeted output from the tool you're using. And we want to be very detailed and specific because we have expectations, but those live in your head. your expectations, the things that you're expecting, that you want, that you hope that you get from this tool, they live in your head. You have to get them out of your head into the instructions, right? If you don't tell me what's in your head, then I can't guess what's in your head. So you have to tell me that, all right? That's what you can imagine ChatGPT is thinking. So let's do this. Let's try to create an activity for teenagers, let's say relatively fluent, but need some work on confidence. And we want it to be relevant to teenagers. Okay? So let's look at a prompt, see how we could structure it, and then see how it looks in ChatGPT. All right? So here's our first one. Now, I don't want you to get overwhelmed when you see this. You might see this and go, oh my God, what is that? I'll tell you what this is. This is exactly what I said. This is being clear. This is being very specific. This is me saying what I want exactly. And again, if you do this right, you only have to do it once. And you might make adjustments, tweaks over time. So let's kind of go through this, not to read through everything. I don't want to just sit here and read to you, right? But I want to give you an idea of what's going on here. Notice first that I have headings. Now, I like to think of these headings: context, audience, task, exclusions and guidelines, for each exercise, variations or extensions, accuracy, output format, goal. I like to think of these that I've marked in orange here as knobs on a kind of control board. So imagine yourself sitting in front of a control board, and you have a bunch of knobs. And what do? You're a sound engineer. You want to turn the knobs so that the sound is just right. The bass is right. The volume is right. Everything is right. What you're doing is turning these knobs, making adjustments until you say, hey, this is the right setting. So with that example, I'm a sound engineer, a producer for a musician, a record label. I get the sound right. We're going to use this on all of our songs. These are the settings. So that's kind of what you're doing here. It's kind of what you're doing. So just to look at some of this, I'm teaching an intermediate level English class, B1, B2, of students aged 14 to 16. They respond best to practical real-world activities that allow them to speak and listen. Here's the class size. Here's the setup. I don't want to use a lot of technology. Now, if I have a bunch of technology, then I want to change that and say, every student should use their computer. Maybe every student has an iPad. I don't know, whatever it is. This is not for you to copy and paste. This is you to say, oh, that's a good structure. I might use that. But then you need to do the work, right? No two teachers will use exactly the same approach, the same prompts, right? Age-appropriate topics that match teen interests. Think music, social media, sports, social life, hobbies, pop culture. And avoid adult or overly complex content. So this is where, if I don't want it to be about this, then I have to say I don't want it to be about that. Reinforcing the audience. Students need more practice in speaking confidently using relevant vocabulary. Specific task. Provide 3 spoken, focused practice exercises. And then notice I'm kind of repeating a little bit how long each one takes and the level. It's okay to be a little repetitive. Sometimes repeating information a couple times reinforces what I want exactly, and that gives you better results. So when it comes to prompting, sometimes for this approach, just this approach, sometimes more is better, and sometimes being a little repetitive is okay. No PowerPoints, no handouts, no write on paper tasks. Okay, so this is all going to be very interactive. Yes, exactly. Okay, I'm reinforcing this. Avoid heavy or mature themes. Keep it engaging and relatable for teens. Okay. Now for each exercise, here I'm going to give a structure. This is kind of the general structure that I want. Okay. Weekend wishes, clearly define the language. step-by-step instructions, time needed, required materials. Okay. Variations. Now I want to offer a tweak for more advanced B2 learners. So for students on the higher end in this class, I want to make sure they feel pushed. You know, you're in a yoga class and the yoga teacher is a good yoga teacher. He or she comes over to the advanced students and says, now you two do this more advanced thing. Everyone else is doing the regular poses and these two advanced students get a special modification. I like to use that approach because I want everyone to be engaged. So I want a variation or something that they can do to extend. Okay? Accuracy, I want to make sure, again, reinforcing the level. I want to make sure, again, I'm avoiding topics, not just saying what topics I want, but topics to avoid. Bars, nightlife, gambling, we don't want that. Keep it positive, relatable, and respectful. Output format, label each activity, and then the goal is generate a fun, interactive speaking exercise. Okay, so this is the basic structure here. And again, don't get lost in the specific words here. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this actually looks. And maybe before we do that, we can look at an example that's not so great. So here we are in ChatGPT. And if you look at this request, here's the prompt that I used here. The prompt that I use, and this is just the first request that I made here. Give me an activity for English learners. Now that is the opposite of what we just looked at. Now, how are the results? What is this activity? Well, the level is A2 to B2, so pretty broad. Focus is speaking, vocabulary, grammar. Again, pretty broad in general. The instructions show learners a picture, a busy street, a park. Ask them to describe what they see, what people are doing. So it's not that this is terrible. It's not necessarily terrible, but ask yourself, is this appropriate for teenagers? Yeah, kind of. Sure, I guess. Is it appropriate for adults? Okay, yeah, they could do it too. Is it appropriate for kind of beginners? Yeah, kind of. Can advanced level students do this? Yeah. So what's going on here is very general. ChatGPT has been very vague because I wasn't very specific. So what does that mean? The more specific I am, the more specific my results should be. Okay? That's kind of the key here. So this is the exact prompt we looked at. We put that in. And what we get, let's see what we get. Exercise 1, hot or not, rating the trends. Practice giving opinions, agreeing, disagreeing politely, and using current vocabulary to describe trends. Okay? Fashion, music, apps, slang. What is something that's really popular right now? Take a few student responses and note them under the categories. Then we have a main activity here. Students take turns saying if they think a trend is hot or not. Some expressions I could use. I think it's awesome because I don't get the hype. It's not my thing, but I see why others like it. Rotate pairs every 4 minutes. Okay, and then do we have our extended for our higher level students? Okay, here it is. Add a mini role play. One student pretends to be a YouTuber trying to promote a trend. That is more complex and more difficult. So this is much better. It's much more detailed. It's much more specific. Exercise 2, I asked for 3, remember, 3 exercises. In my ears, music, chat, roulette. Practice describing music preferences. But it's not just that. It's exactly what to do for the main activity. Divide students into 2 circles, inner and outer. So like 2 rings, right? Interlocking rings. Outer circles stays still. Outer circle stays still. Inner circle rotates after 2 minutes. What's your favorite artist right now? Describe their music in 3 words. Would you recommend it? Why or why not? Do we have the extended B2 level? Students role play as music critics, giving a short review of an artist. That's very good. So these are all, number 1, they're relevant to that student group, right? They're challenging. We have the extended exercise. They're not giving handouts as we asked for, right? So this is very, very specific and actually useful. Guess my weekend. Main activity, students think of one real made up thing they did over the weekend in pairs. Students ask yes or no questions. Now, so this looks much, much better, right? Way better. But what if I am not super happy with the first one? I feel like the recommended expressions were too casual. I don't want to teach that kind of casual language. So what if I say, and this is a key thing. When you get a result, don't just say, okay, that's it. Refine, improve, and do this with follow-ups. So for the first exercise activity, I want more phrasal verb phrases and less casual sentences. Okay? And then so I get a variation of exercise 1, a revision of exercise 1 that's maybe a bit more precise because I didn't state that in my initial instructions. That's okay. You're never going to be able to say everything. And so sometimes think about that. Sometimes I want to say it clearly. Sometimes I want to follow up with a request after. So let's see. Catch on. So here are my phrasal verbs that I can use. Catch on, go out of style, be into, take off, grow on someone, keep up with, fall for. So okay, that has more phrasal verbs, like I asked, and some example sentences that use it. So better, and maybe I can combine the two or continue revising. The point is, don't just say, okay, well, that's it. Maybe refine, maybe improve, maybe ask for a revision that has a little tweak here or there. And that's always a good idea. I never just take the first result and say, okay, that's it. All right, so that's the main chunk of our first approach. I want to just show you a very quick variation just to kind of prove that it doesn't have to be exactly as I did it. So president of OpenAI, Greg Brockman, he posted basically this: a 4-section prompt structure, not just for education, but for everything. So we could do the same thing with a slightly different structure. His was state the goal, the format, return format, basically the results that you want, basic guidelines. It's doing a similar thing. It's just a bit less detail, right? And there are fewer sections. And then a context dump. This is information about what I'm doing. So this lesson is with one adult student over Zoom, for example, right? The student works in finance, but doesn't only like to talk about this field. Okay, so that might help create it. And if we use that one, let me switch back over to it. We also can get some pretty good results. So this is the same prompt there, and life hacks: share and compare, practice fluency, comparison language, and descriptive detail. Student explains 2 to 3 personal life hacks they use to save time, stay organized, or make daily tasks easier. That's a very interesting, kind of fun thing to do with an adult, not necessarily with teenagers. Life hacks, I don't know, it might not be as relevant, but this is not for teenagers. And then we have the extension as well for C1 level: discuss why certain hacks work for certain personality types or cultural contexts. Whoa, okay, that's definitely challenging. The upgrade dilemma, again, talking about upgrading aspects of your life, budget constraints. This is not stuff that coworkers, you play the role of a friend or coworker asking follow-up questions or challenging their decision. Definitely not teen appropriate, really, or interesting, but useful for an adult student, right? So we can still get good results that way as well. Okay, so if you have questions, again, put those in the Q&A. I'll be answering questions when we get to that part, but I want to make sure we go through our other approaches. Now, I hope I don't need to recap that, but I just want to make it clear that what we're doing for approach 1 is we're trying to be as clear as possible. But for approach 2, we're doing something very different. So again, what problem are we solving? We're solving the problem of generic, mushy, inaccurate, not level or age appropriate results for activities, quizzes, evaluations, all kinds of things that we need to do as language teachers. But what if I don't know how to say what I want exactly? But I do have an example of what I want. I've done it before on my own. This is approach 2, and this is the one I think I use most often. It is my go-to. It is extremely useful. Okay. What is a template? Template is a kind of a structure or thing that you're using that then other things will be based on. Other things will be modeled on, right? That's what a template is. So this one is basically providing a real example of ideal results. See this? I did this myself. This is good. I like this. You need to make one like this. I'm not going to tell you what this is, but just look at it, study it, understand it, and do one like this, right? So you're leaving the process of figuring out what is going on there, the style, the tone, the whatever, to ChatGPT in this case. For this one, we may want to break it down into multiple steps. Sometimes you want to break things down into multiple steps because otherwise it can get confused and can cause chaos and bad results. We don't want that. So break it down. We're going to be doing two prompts. And you'll see when we look at it why we need to do two. And we're also going to be confirming understanding. So basically, if I'm talking to you, I say, hey, look at this. You see this? You understand it? Try to look at it really carefully. And you look at it and you go, okay, yeah. Maybe it's a painting or something. Got it? And then you say, you look at it, got it. Okay, all right. Now, you said you got it, so you got it. Now do another one. That's basically what we're doing here, okay? So let's see how we can actually do that. This time, we're going to try creating a quiz. Now, quizzes are very easy, right? A quiz. So easy. Well, it's easy to make a simple quiz, a very easy quiz, but what about a quiz that's really, really difficult? Well, let me show you what I mean. So what we're doing here is, let me go to my next prompt here. And again, don't get lost in the sauce. This is not about the exact words that I'm using. It's about the general thing that I'm doing, the structure. And there are a million ways to say it, right? So notice I'm breaking this down into prompt 1 and prompt 2. In prompt 1, provide an example and confirm understanding. So learn the style and structure and difficulty level of the quiz provided below. Again, yeah, you need to put in a little work here, but there's much less detail, right, than our first one. Much, much less. Then what do? Instead of just giving a structure or giving a instruction or having those knobs that I tune, I just say, here's the real one. So here's the example word. Now for this quiz, let me just say this. The reason it's difficult is it should be challenging to anyone but a native or highly proficient English speaker. The incorrect usage must be subtle, but still definitively incorrect. What we're doing here is we're picking one sentence that uses the word awkwardly, not even wrong grammatically, but that doesn't seem right. But it's definitely wrong, but it's not like wrong grammatically maybe. Well, that's really difficult. That's really difficult to do with instructions. I've tried it with a million instructions. I just can't get consistent results. But when I show it, very different. So the word is plausible. And if you read these sentences, you can pick it out. The most plausible way to lose weight is diet and exercise. His explanation for the missing documents was plausible. It's plausible that the traffic caused the delay. The detective found a plausible motive for the crime. Well, if we read this one, it's definitely grammatically correct, but the most plausible way to lose weight, we don't really use the word plausible When we talk about losing weight, we use it for explanations and motivations and things like that. It's kind of how we use it. So the answer, A, this one is incorrect, is good, and we have an explanation for why. But that's tough. Try to make that quiz on your own. That's tough. That'll take you 20 minutes just to come up with one. I only know that because it took me 30 minutes. I was like, okay, I gotta come up with a really good one here. It was not easy because I wrote this one, right? So that's what we're doing. Then, this is key. If you understand how this quiz is structured and the level of subtlety required for the incorrect option, say, I understand, and wait for my next instructions. Then we ask for a new quiz. First word, conundrum. Next word, evaluate, and we keep going. At this point, we've trained a little quiz-making machine, right? And then we can just give it words, one word, and then another word, and then another word. So let's try that out. Let's try it out, shall we? Let's take a look. Oops, I'm not on. Okay, let me show you what I got when I searched or when I put in just this. This is the prompt. Give me an advanced English quiz. That's it. Give me an nothing else. There are no other instructions. So what did I get? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Okay. Let's evaluate the questions. Okay. His comments were precipitate and full of kindness. Precipitate and full of kindness. The scandal seemed to precipitate his resignation. She was known for her precipitate in fashion design. Precipitate in fashion design. He tried to precipitate her in calming down, into calming down. Okay. So, not obvious. And I see a big problem here. One could call it a hallucination. Look at this. And I promise this is, I just put this in and this is the first result. There are 2 C's. Results, A, B, C, C. Okay. If I say the answer is C, it might be right. But there are 2 correct answers in that case. Very strange. Okay. So not great, right? What is the most precise meaning of untenable? Right. So, it's just, it's not great. It's not great. It's a little confusing. It seems to be all over the place. What about when we use our prompt? This is the first prompt. We get, I understand. Remember, what we do is we give it, we show it, and then I understand. Then, first word, conundrum. Now let's read these. The committee faced a conundrum over how to allocate limited resources fairly. She solved the conundrum after a few minutes of thinking. His consistent lateness is a conundrum we need to address. The ethics of using AI in warfare presents a difficult conundrum. Now, the answer is C, but is C so wrong that we can say that's, grammatically incorrect or something? No, it's just that, well, conundrum typically refers to a difficult problem or dilemma involving a complex solution. So he's late, and that's a simple thing. Is it a conundrum? No, he's late because he's always late because that's who he is. That's not a conundrum. It's a problem, but it's not a conundrum, right? And so it's very subtle. This is good. This is very good. What if we use evaluate? Okay, evaluate. We need more data to evaluate the effectiveness of the new drug. She evaluated his suggestion as impractical and quickly moved on. The teacher will evaluate each student's performance on the group project. I evaluated whether the view from the balcony was worth the extra rent. Now the answer is D. But think about that. Grammatically, is that correct? Yeah, I evaluated whether the view from the balcony, but it's not the type of thing we would use the word for. So again, we have a grammatically correct sentence that uses the word awkwardly. That's exactly what we need, exactly what we're looking for. That is hard to describe and hard to get with instructions. So this is approach 2, and approach 2 is very, very powerful in my opinion, in my experience. So think about when you're doing this, when you're trying this approach. What is something that's hard to explain? Something that you just can't really do well with instructions? Maybe instead work on getting a really good one example that you spend a lot of 20 minutes working on, and then you've got a thing that you can use to train your little machine to make more, as we just did. Okay. So far we've covered 2 approaches. I said we're going to do 3. After this, we're going to go through some key things I want you to keep in mind as sort of food for thought principles that I want you to maybe think about as you continue to explore these tools. And then we'll do our Q&A. So the third approach is kind of a hybrid of the first 2, but it's using it in a unique way. I have a source of truth. I don't want to create more of that thing that I like in approach number 2. What I want is to use this source of truth as a standard that I can measure things against. This is great for evaluations. If I just say in ChatGPT, here's a writing sample of a student. I want you to evaluate it. Tell me this student's level. Well, you're kind of talking to a black box because you don't really know what it thinks about what a level should be and what it's basing its opinion on. It's a black box. So you need to remove the black box and say, no, I don't want your opinion. Here, measure everything against this standard that I'm giving you. I'm providing the standard. Maybe you make it up, but I'm providing the standard. Then you get consistent results. So this is where maybe results are all over the place. You're trying to evaluate students, but it's just like random sometimes, and it doesn't make sense because it's a black box. So we provide a clear rubric. That's not a word. I'm hallucinating. We provide a clear rubric, standard, criteria. We make sure we're clear about what we want the output to kind of look like, the formatting. And then very importantly, if we're going to be using this often, let's say for evaluating students, we need to test it. You're like building a machine for doing a thing. So you need to make sure you test it with low level, intermediate, high level, different levels to make sure it works. Hey, this works. Okay, so how does this look? All right, let's try. Let's look at our source of truth here, our structure. And you can use whatever standard you like. Everybody knows this framework, so we're going to go with that. And why not? Let's throw in a score out of 100. Why not? Okay. So provide an accurate English evaluation using the following, right? Then I want the level. I want the numeric score out of 100, explanation of the scores given, recommendations for improvement. All right. Some things that are very important, focus on maybe the core descriptors, the descriptions for each thing in the rubric, and a longer response does not. Maybe now here's where you put things where you're getting inconsistent results. I put things like that in the instructions because I'm maybe getting results where it's quite short. And so it tricks the AI into thinking, oh, well, that's not as good as the long one. No, you can write long badly and short well, right? So I want to make sure I just state that because I've seen that as an error, as a mistake, as a hallucination. Maybe in testing, I test out prompts and I work with them. Maybe if I see that, I put a couple bullet points of things I want to avoid. One thing would be like, if you ask for a conversation topic for English learners, in my experience, 80% of the time it's going to say environmental something. For some reason, I mean, I don't feel any particular way about that topic, but the fact that it's just always that when I ask is kind of weird. So often I'll put in the instructions, avoid mentioning this as a topic, just because I get that 80% of the time, and I want more variety. And that kind of breaks the glass and makes it not do that. And then you get more consistent, varied results, right? So and then you give the clear, accurate descriptions of your rubric. The fluency, the vocabulary, the grammar, the content for all the levels. Now, I don't have to leave it up to the black box, right? I'm providing it. And then the final feedback structure, after reading the student's writing, provide overall scores, explanation in plain language, strengths and areas to improve, and advice. And yeah, this is kind of repetitive because I did mention this at the beginning too, but it doesn't always hurt to be repetitive. If you understand, say, I understand, please provide your first text. Then we have 2 texts here, beginner and intermediate. I'm going to copy the intermediate because I don't think I did that one. So let's do that one. Let's do that one. Okay, now let's go over to our results here. By the way, if I didn't say it, I think I didn't skip to this slide, but what we're trying to do is evaluate students' writing. That's what we want to accomplish here. I've got a bunch of students, and I want to evaluate their writing ability accurately. Okay. So we provide that prompt. Then we get, I understand, please provide your first text. Then the beginner one. Now, this is the one where we expect to get something like in the A range, right? A2, numeric score 35, explanation. The writing is understandable and mostly stays on topic, but there are many grammatical mistakes, simple vocabulary, and limited sentence variety. Areas to improve for each descriptor, and some advice, right? Now, I want to do another one. Let's do another writing, another text. Let's instead of saying do, let me be more clear. Let's evaluate another text. Oops. Typing under pressure, another text. Okay, then we do colon, and we paste in what is probably going to be B2, maybe, something like that. Intermediate. Let's say B1 could be B1, maybe B2. Okay, overall score, B2. There we go. So that's another thing. When you're testing it out, you want to measure it against what you already know. I know this is about B2. That's what I said, right? Well, there it is. I knew the first one was about A1. Well, there it is. Or A2. There it is, right? So, and you don't do 2, do 10 that are a wide range that you've already evaluated. And basically what you're doing is saying, hey, now I know this is accurate. Now I know this is good. Now I know this thing works. Now what you have is kind of a machine, a little machine where you can simply paste in a student's writing and get accurate results and feedback. That's cool. Now here I get to reach C1, focus on, and then how do I get to the next level? Would you like a C1 rewrite to compare? Maybe, yeah, well, that might be helpful. I might provide that. Maybe I'm building PDFs for the students, and I'm using this to build PDFs that are very useful to help the student improve. This is what you did that you could improve. This is where you're weak. This is where you're strong. Here's some advice. And hey, look, if you wanted to rewrite this one level higher than where you are right now, write it like this. This is a little bit more advanced and sounds pretty good. It sounds slightly better than the first. Okay. So hopefully these 3 approaches are starting to get the wheels turning for you if you weren't already using things like these approaches. Approach 1, we are very detailed, very specific. We tune the knobs on the soundboard. Approach 2, we show an example and get more of that once we've trained that. Approach 3, we have a standard or rubric and we measure things against the standard or rubric to get highly accurate results, because they need to be highly accurate, because if they're not highly accurate, they're not useful. This is where the rubric 1 is where accuracy is critical. If it's not accurate, it's pointless. I can't give this to a student if it's a black box. I don't know. I have to go redo it, right? So, 3 approaches. Now, I want to give you a few just things to wrap up some of the things we've been talking about. Some key principles for you to keep in mind as you continue to go out there, explore, test, play. Never outsource your taste. People talk about, well, what's the last job that AI is going to take? I think it might be teaching, honestly. People say education first. No, I disagree. I think teachers are here to stay, and now we are super powered by AI. It's incredible, right? It's amazing. I think that this is the best thing that's ever happened to education. It's not replacing it. It's making it more personalized and interesting, useful. So never outsource your taste means you have an idea in your head of what you think is good. Never give that away. That is the thing that you should keep and use that as the standard for everything. This prompt needs to be better because it's not up to my standard. This tool isn't good because it's not up to my standard. Your taste, your individual taste is what allows you to be still unique, to hold on to your humanness. It is the core, I think, of what we have that makes us the users of the tools and not the tools, if that makes sense. So never outsource your taste. Garbage in, garbage out. Self-explanatory, I think. If you ask for an advanced quiz, don't expect great results. You might get 2 that are both C. Garbage in, garbage out. If you work on the instructions and spend time on that, that's not garbage. And if you refine it over time, that's not garbage. So you're going to get better results. Don't leave anything to the imagination. All of the stuff, the things that you need and want as an educator live in your head. And so you have to say those things. I don't know what's in your head. You have to say those things. If you're talking to me, out loud to me. If you're talking to AI, you have to make sure that they're clear in the instructions. Demonstrate before asking. That would be our second approach, right? Where we're creating a template. Hey, I like this. This is good. Because if you don't show me that, I don't know as the AI that I'm using, that you're using. It's always a back and forth. There's a great episode of Star Trek about this where the crew, they're being abducted by aliens in their sleep, and they go into this thing called the holodeck that can follow instructions and build things in front of you, and like magic. And they're having this conversation with the computer, and the table was slanted. So the table is slanted. So the computer is creating this in front of their eyes, following their instructions. It's not perfect the first time. It's iterative. I didn't like how casual the first activity was. The sentences were too casual, and I wish there were more phrasal verbs. Iterate. It's always a back and forth. And like we did with the second and third approaches, sometimes it makes more sense to do multiple prompts together, multiple steps, maybe multiple tools. You get an image from Midjourney and you use it here, and working between tools. So it's not just about using 2 or 3 prompts. It's about thinking in multiple steps. Don't just think, here's my thing I'm going to use, and that's it. Always be thinking, can I bring these 2 things together? How does this flow? Does this work better as 1, 2, 3, or 4 steps? Think like that, and you can come up with some really innovative, cool ideas that really help you and your students. And embrace imperfection. We are trying to get rid of AI slop here. We are trying to reduce the negatives, the downsides of hallucinations, but it's never going to be 100%. So let's just accept that. Maybe you can use it in an activity for your students. You get some weird results and you ask your students to figure out what's weird about it. I don't know, but embrace that. I think that's good. We're getting short on time here. I want to get to the questions, but just a little food for thought here. just to sort of spark your imagination a bit, you can use images very creatively, upload an image to ChatGPT, ask for a list of adjectives relevant to the image. But before you show that to the students, to your student or students, ask them to come up with their own list of adjectives for the same image, and then you can kind of compare and contrast. You can create role plays where each student comes up with a historical scenario. You imagine traveling back into the past and speaking to Hypatia of Alexandria or something. And then they have to have a dialogue with that person back then and make it realistic and try to teach them about how cell phones work or something. Correction breakdowns, you can get detailed corrections, of course, on a text or whatever they might say. And then maybe give those corrections to another student and they can improve the first version using the corrections, something like that, just as an idea. Paragraphs, you can break down paragraphs and say basically remove all of the actual meaning words from this sentence and rewrite it with just the bones, just the grammar. So you're teaching grammar not by teaching prepositions, nouns, adverbs, and adverbial phrases and things like that. Instead, you're saying, learn the structure of this and then make 5 more of these without knowing what anything is called. It's a deeper, more intuitive way to understand grammar. And you can create fun adventure stories that are very interactive, where the whole class is maybe each coming up with their own story and people vote on whose story is the best. And then the one that's the best, everybody plays that one. And so you're in an alien world and you have to solve a mystery, and the ChatGPT or the AI is playing the NPC characters and describing the environment as you go. It can be a lot of fun.